So you're with Sean and Andy from Tough Waterproofing, and in this episode we're going to be talking about and showing you how to start laminating your deck. So the laminating with the base coat and the chop strand mat, which is basically going to provide you waterproofing. So this example here could be like a small porch roof, and what we've done is we've actually cut the mat to suit, because the 450 gram mat comes with a feathered edge and a square edge, and we always want the feathered edge to go over the square edge with a minimum 50 mil.
50 mil, yes.
So this is the mat that we've used here, shows you the feathered edge there, and when we're finished with it, just put it back in the bag, because we want to keep that mat nice and dry. If we get moisture on it, it's going to go a little bit fluffy, which we don't want, and then that is ready to use the next time. Okay.
Yes, so depending how big your roof is, it depends how many strips of this we use. So the idea is to cut all your matting to shape and size. On a windy day, you probably have to do this in individual ones, but on a non-windy day, run them all out, 50 mil overlap. Doesn't matter if it's more, but minimum 50 mil overlap with that feathered edge. And then we're going to roll them up, aren't we?
Yep, so we're going to roll them up. So basically, roll them up, try and keep them
as tight as possible.
And then we're going to put those out of the way for safekeeping.
If you have to remove them from the roof for any particular reason, then I suggest you number them up, maybe a piece of tape on them, say row 1, because if your roof's not true, then if one doesn't fit, if you put that in the wrong position, then all the others
don't fit. Exactly. So I'll stick that one to one side nicely there.
Brilliant.
So we come on to now bandaging the joints. Any details we've got with the 450 gram bandage?
So this is 450 gram bandage. Basically, it's been cut off one of these rolls, so it's identical. So if you ever run out, you need a few strips, you can cut them off your main roll.
Exactly.
So we're going to use this bandage now for reinforcing our joints between our deck. And remember, if we're using square edge boards, remember we don't have to do this on the tongue and groove boards, but we're using square edge boards, and we've got those small 2 to 3 mil gaps between the differential movement. This is what we're going to use to reinforce that joint. To provide a layer under there to prevent pinholing and to obviously strengthen that joint.
The joint's up.
Very important.
So basically we're going to come around now and we're going to lay it up to this edge in the trim here, so that we straddle that edge of that joint of that trim, covering our fixings as we go. So we're going to literally frame out the roof. We're also going to cut a bit to go into our corner detail there.
We can also use this for doing our joints between our trims.
And also here.
That.
And also here where we've used the pre-formed corner.
So I'll give that to you, Andy, if you want to do that.
I'll start doing that.
And fortunately, we've had some spare waste from our cutting of our main laminate, and we're going to use this for detailing our corners. Remember, on this corner we don't need to do this process, but what we're going to need to do here is cut a section to fit on the here. So what we're looking for is a nice hand size, around about 9 inch square. So and what we're going to do, we're going to laminate this into here. So we're looking to that to come down to the bottom of this radius of the trim. So if you can see where I'm doing, I'm going to fold that over like so, pull that back there like that, gentle pressure on there, and you'll just see a triangle section in there. I'll cut that out, and that is going to be easier to mould onto that corner. And if you're on a roof, I don't know about you, how many times you come to a corner, Andy, but if you tuck it in there, because I've come to many a roof with a bucket of resin and a roller, and I'm thinking, where is it? 3 doors down. Okay, so we're all our detail work is pretty much cut.
So basically now we're just going to continue running out this bandage around the edge of the details.
So under normal circumstances we'll be working off the roll, but because this is such a small little roof, we're going to cut all the bandages to suit before we start.
And it's always worth remembering as well that where we go mat onto mat, we want that overlap there for strength. We've got to make sure we've got sufficient resin between the 2 layers.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you use a pre-formed corner, Sean, so we've got the edge of the freeform corner there. So
absolutely.
literally, again, just take it round.
Let me just cut that
Yep.
one. You can tear these bandages, and you do end up with a feathered edge, so it's preference. But the cleaner and smoother we keep these edges, the neater your roof's going to be. So you don't want stray strands coming up onto this section here. As I say, the cleaner and smoother we keep this, the nicer the roof's going to look at the finish.
So for this now, we're finished with the bandage. And then we're going to use the tissue bandage, really thin detailing tissue.
So this is 100mm wide, and it fits nicely over the 75mm wide bandage.
So
we're going to detail, which I need to cut.
So literally, when we come to do our overlap over our trim there, by the time we've laminated with the 450, which will give it its strength, the tissue bandage just blends that out, very minimal sanding, and it's going to blend in nicely with the smooth edge of the trim, isn't it?
It's a nice finishing touch to the roof. As I say, this is the bit that people see from street level, and if it's a case of who did your roof, or wow, who did your roof?
Your corners are kind of what you're judged on, aren't
they? They are, yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Good corners will get you more work.
If they see you spent a nice time on all your detail work, they know you spent a nice bit of time doing the rest of the roof.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're ready for the
basically
next stage.
Next stage, so we're going to start laminating.
Yes.
So
we do this in 3 distinct stages. First off, we would take a small amount of resin and we'll do all our detail work, which will be all our trims. Then we would take a larger amount of resin, obviously depending how big the roof is, to do all our bandaging, and then we'll do the large amount of quantity of resin to do the field area of the roof. So 3 distinct stages. So I think we've got a litre in there, haven't we, Andy?
Yep, so basically decanted a litre of resin into there. It's come from the full can, it was a new can, so I've given it a good stir up just to make sure that everything's nice and blended. We've got our litre in there ready to go. Okay. So we've got our summer catalyst in here, ready to go, obviously stick for stirring, and our tools.
Okay.
So
we need to refer to our catalyst chart.
We certainly do.
So I'll just grab that.
Yep. As we haven't got the bucket on this very small roof.
So there's our catalyst chart. So the temperature today is
we're still at 16 degrees.
16 degrees. So again, we fall between 14 and 24, so we're using summer grade catalyst. So come down to the next one, and we're falling between 13 and 19 degrees, so we're using 2%. So 1 litre at 2% is 20 ml.
So I'm literally going to squeeze. Just priming that. Make sure that's nice and tight. These go up a little bit quicker than that, but there we are. Bang on 20 mil.
Cool.
So we're ready to start putting the catalyst in. Quick visual check, make sure we've got tools on the roof.
Ready.
All our tools ready. Don't be running down the ladder to get the rollers.
Really.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing up here pretty much that we don't need, so we're not going to run into any issues. So at this point we make the decision we're going to start.
Okay, so shall we start doing our detail work?
Yes.
Okay, so what we say is, if you're working on a small roof, you might want a small piece of board.
Here's one I made earlier.
Because you don't want to be kneeling on it, because we tend to wet the bandage rather than wetting the corner, because we want to keep our dripping of resin to a minimum.
To a minimum, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
absolutely. So what we do is we're going to put it's a wet on wet system, so we want to put resin on the underside, resin on the top. So save kneeling on it all the time. Well, you can use a small piece of board.
Yep.
Okay.
So everything's all ready to go. I've been chosen to be in charge of the catalyst, so it's my responsibility to make sure this is done right and it's going to go off. So at this stage, the catalyst goes in, and we're now in a position where we've got to use this, aren't we? Because we can't now stop the cure.
Absolutely.
So a good stir up with a clean dry stick.
As you see, there's a very small amount of catalyst to a large amount of resin, so we must make sure that it's thoroughly stirred. If you don't stir it properly, then what's going to happen is going to cure unevenly on the roof, and maybe some parts will stay tacky for a long time. So we must give it a good stir.
Good stir up. At that point we can take the excess of our stirring stick and we can put that to one side.
So once you've done that, you can saturate your sleeve. Gives you an opportunity to stir it a little bit more, make sure. So now we're ready to start laminate. You won't have the luxury of standing around your roof, you'll be kneeling on the roof, so as I say, this is why we tend to use a board or an area that you're not going to kneel in.
Yeah.
So nicely saturated. I tend to give it a quick twist so you're taking off the excess.
Yeah.
And then you can wet out a small area of decking or the board, and then what we're going to do, so by doing this process I'm putting resin on both sides of my piece of 450 gram mat.
So I'm going to be your glamorous assistant here, Sean, and pass you over.
So what we're going to do, we're going to just lay this into position with our fingertips, making sure that it's just coming down to the bottom of the radius. If it hangs down below that radius, then we'll ignore it because gravity will always beat us. We'll trim that off and sort that out once it's cured.
Yeah.
So once we've done that, we can actually start maybe using a brush to start pushing this into position. So as I say, it's just with the end of your brush, you're just going to tease the fiberglass into position.
And if you're doing that with a brush rather than a roller, you're cutting down on the drips all the time, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. Remember, this is hollow, this section, so what you want to do is make sure you've got plenty of resin on there, but don't want to be dressing the fiberglass into there because for obvious reasons. So we're relying on the fiberglass just to stretch over that area, okay? So what we're going to do is just, as I say, tease it into position. And once that binder, that binder that's holding those fibres starts to break down, then we're going to find this is a lot easier to start moulding.
Yeah.
And of course we have our paddle roller. So the action with the paddle roller is just a gentle backwards and forwards motion over that area. And I don't know if you can see in the camera how this is now just starting to break down. So we don't want to stretch it, we don't want to thin it out, but what we want to do is break that laminate down so it starts shaping.
So we're keeping the integrity of the mat over that void, aren't we?
That's it.
Yeah.
If we start stretching it, then you start finding pinholes appearing in this hollow section, so that's the last thing we want, but we want to just make sure that it's dressing nicely. And as you can see, that has literally taken seconds to do that one corner. So very, very quick, very, very simple. And this, you're going to see the benefits now of the very fine tissue. As I say, this has got a heavy weave in it, but this is 100 gram tissue, and you see what happens when we just lay this over. You don't want to be using your paddle roller on this, you just want to use a soft roller or a brush, and then very gently you just wipe over the surface, and you'll see how smooth that is going to become. And that's going to take minimal preparation at a later date.
And we can actually see already where the colour of the resin has changed from the bluey green colour to that start of almost a light brown colour. So we know at this stage that catalyst was put in it. So Sean's actually breathing a sigh of relief that I did it. That tells us the cure is starting, basically, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I'm just putting the second piece on, and then as you can see, what's happening is it's actually drawing all the fiberglass back, making it nice and taut and nice and flat. And as I say, minimal preparation later on.
And the more time that you spend making sure that tissue is all flat, Sean, it just cuts down any sanding that you're going to have to do, isn't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, in the early days of contracting, when we were doing this, we would have to sand it back, maybe put some more resin on there,
yeah.
sand it again,
yeah.
just to make it look nice. But as you can see, you know, this is almost fit for purpose already.
Yeah.
So there we go. We can crack on and do
nice
the
looking corner. So basically, you're going to start laying. I'm going to come round behind you, Sean,
We can, as on a small roof, we
Yep.
can start doing the bandaging, we can
Yep.
do the detail as we go.
As we go.
Normal stages on a larger roof, detail work first, and then we do the bandaging.
Yep.
But we'll see how we go with the resin, because this might cure on us.
Never know.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm going to come round and I'm going to start following you round.
So when we're doing the bandaging, approximately a dip a metre. So what we can do, always start in the middle of your run, because you're going to push in the resin halfway that way and halfway that way. If I land my roller here, then you've got to push the resin all the way to the end. So start in the middle, backwards and forwards, simple. Second layer over the top. As I say, it's a wet on wet system.
And now I can come in and I'm going to start consolidating that, which I'm now pushing the mat into the resin, breaking down those binders. I'm not going too fast because I don't want this to start spraying.
And if you noticed, I've put another layer of resin on that piece of bandage there, because if I put resin on my deck and then directly on the top there, I've got to force it through with my paddle roller there. So we always put a second layer of resin onto our bandage before we lay the next piece.
And pretty much when we start paddle rolling, if we've got enough resin down during our application, Sean, and we put just enough pressure on that, we're actually going to start to lose the white colour of the fibres, aren't we?
That's it.
So we know.
And I do say it's the person using the paddle roller responsibility to talk to the guy laying the resin, because if that's not breaking down the binder and releasing those fibres, then there's not enough resin. These resin lines. So you need to call the guy laying the resin back, put some more on.
You're pretty good there, Sean. So literally I'll come down now through here, okay, a little bit of pressure onto it, and let me do it in sort of like reasonably short strokes. Make sure I drive it into that edge. I can see the resin coming up through the mat. So can you actually over paddle roll the mat, Sean?
It gets to the stage where it's not beneficial because the resin's so far cured and becomes a bit tacky. But the idea is to cover every single inch, every single part of the resin. That's very important.
Yep.
If you don't, if you can see this front piece of bandage that I put on now, if you was not to use the paddle roller on it, it would actually cure like this. So you'd have these lumps, bumps, areas, pinholes. So it's very important that you actually use the paddle roller on every square inch of your roof.
I'll give you that. So once this actually starts to cure and we've paddle rolled it properly, it should dry clear enough that we can, if we've got markings on the board, we'll be able to read them.
I've done this, I've been on the job many a time. Someone's phoned me up. I've asked them, I'm laminating at the moment, can I call you back? I write the telephone number on the deck, and I think later on, where's that telephone number? And you can actually get back up and read it through the laminate. And that's a good indication how smooth and clear that your laminate should be.
So there we go. Consolidated. Back over again.
Have you noticed I'm just laying some of this bandage in position? Because it actually takes a couple of minutes for that binder to break down. Once it's broken down, it's a little bit easier to mould.
Almost like the weight of it is sort of like starting to form itself, isn't it?
Yeah, and it just that binder dissolving, it just releases those fibres, and we can. It tends to mould it, release those fibres, allow us to mould very easily. You can see now. So it's gentle pressures in there.
So when we're coming across details like this, what we want to do is make sure that this mat forms into that radius really tightly, because we don't want it to cure and have an area where water can get into it. So
another wise precaution, and is also when we're walking around, if we do find any drips on our fascias or anything, if you've got a brush them out, because they're much easier to get rid of at this stage than they are at a later stage.
Cleanliness. bit of good housekeeping does save you time later on, doesn't it? So I'm now literally just going to come across that, I'm not going to use my paddle roller, working that tissue bandage in across that joint. And we should have at the end of it quite a nice joint. We can trim off any excess afterwards. So Sean's just coming around with those. We've got a few little bits of strands of mat there, but before we top coat, we're going to be giving it a light sand. We're going to make sure we cover those. You're doing most of the work on this one, Sean. There we go.
Okay, so a bit of tissue bandage onto these, and we've got those two there.
Yeah, and those two there. Yeah, so there's your bits of bandage for those ones there. And you might need one more, we might have lost.
And our resin seems to be still doing quite well, so we're within the timescales. But did you mention that it's changed colour?
Yes, so it's telling us that the catalyst is in, which is important because we want to make sure.
If it hadn't changed colour, then we'd start worrying.
Yeah. Well, I'd start worrying because that was my job.
Okay, last few bits.
So that's going to
Lovely.
go around there.
This section here.
So again, just paddle rolling it to break that binder down because we want it to start following the shape, and just making sure we take those edges in. So now if you don't get one of these edges in quite tight enough, you're going to notice it when you come to check over your roof and sand. But at the end of the day, we can address that. Anything that we need to do to modify or remedy this roof, as long as we've spotted it before the top coat goes on, really easy to put right on, isn't it?
This is the beauty of the fiberglass roofing. If you make a mistake, let's face it, every mistake costs you money, but you can put it right with this, and it doesn't become a second-hand roof. It's always going to be a new roof.
So again, just making sure that I'm saturating that tissue bandage. So you're not going to put the paddle roller on it. The paddle roller will kind of destroy it. So making sure I take out any little bubbles and wrinkles. The last little bit in there I'm going to do with my brush, because I can then stipple it into place.
Hey, Andy, I think we're nearly there on this.
I think we're a little bit of tissue bandage on this detail down here, unless of course we want to leave the tissue off that bit, Sean, so that we can show the benefits of it.
Yeah, we can show the benefits of the tissue at a later date. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so that's a very good idea.
So we'll leave that one. So just making sure, driving out any out. Take off my little bits of excess of resins. Well, a little bit more. So you got, yeah, I'll grab your roller just to get that in. And at this stage, anywhere where we've got a little build up of resin, we can just take it round, take the roller round, take off those excesses, and again that's going to help us later on. Okay.
So I think we've done all our detail work, Andy.
Yep.
Is it worth us just having a quick look around the roof to make sure there are no drips?
I think it is, but I think also
any defects?
at this stage, if we were using 8x2 tongue and groove balls, and while I've got this bit of resin left over, we're not going to laminate this.
So if you come to an evening and you haven't got time to finish your roof, we've sealed all our trims onto our deck. If we put a layer of resin over our boards, we are pretty much waterproof.
Yeah.
You know, we could go home, sleep well, knowing that the boards are not going to get wet. I would tend to still throw a sheet over, but you're halfway there, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So we're looking for that shine over the boards. We're not using an excess, just to make sure we've got no dry areas.
If you've got the, as I say, I think Andy just mentioned, if you've got the tongue groove, get the resin inside those grooves, it seals it up, maybe on the top of fixings, but you've now got a nice sealed roof.
Yeah. So if we literally do all our detailing today, Sean, we've sealed this roof up, lift the boards, they're nice and watertight. We cover it over and we come back tomorrow. Do we have to do any preparation before we start to laminate, or can we laminate onto what we've got?
Obviously we have to make sure it's very
Yep.
dry. It's got to be bone dry, no moisture on that at all.
Yep.
I might check any if there's any fibres sticking proud on the bandage, but apart from that we can go straight over.
So we don't need to refresh the base resin to go on it? No, okay, that's absolutely fine. So there's our detailing done. Next episode we're going to laminate.
Do the main laminate.
See you soon.
See you in the next episode.